It has officially happened. The Detroit Lions have addressed the backup nose tackle position, and I'm here for it. So let's get right into it. So, yes, it is the second straight night of some late night news for free agency for the Detroit Lions, but this is the fun of free agency. At this point, just wait till 10 p.m. and things are going to start to go down. Are officially signing, according to Tom Pelissero, Cardinals nose tackle Roy Lopez to a 1 year, $4.65 million deal. Now, this was for me the top need for the Detroit Lions in free agency. It didn't mean they had to spend the most money here, but the top need for me was defensive tackle. I wanted the Detroit Lions to potentially take two swings, but at very least, I wanted them to raise the floor of the backup nose tackle position. I like Broderick Martin, but I wanted them to raise the floor there, add a little bit more sustainability to what we are as a run defensive team, but also the Detroit Lions turned around and added a little bit of juice as well with Roy Lopez. There is some position flexibility, but he, a majority of the time, at least from the film that I had went through of Roy Lopez, lived in the nose tackle role a little bit, that he popped outside the guard, but not very often. But Roy Lopez, who is a former sixth-round pick from New Mexico State and then over to Arizona at 6'2", 320 pounds, exactly how that sounds. He is a tanky, stout, really thick in the lower body interior defensive lineman that so far in the NFL maybe has been a little bit up and down, of course, him being on his second team. But this past season was productive. 18 pressures for Arizona as well as 14 stops on the season. And for the Lions at backup nose tackle, of course, it was Broderick Martin and it was Chris Smith. And this, I think, just raises the floor a little bit. But like I said, it gives them a little bit of juice as a pass rusher as well. And I think Roy Lopez at 27 years old, there's also upside for potentially sticking around long term here. I don't know that the ceiling is like, okay, long term starter, but he definitely could stick around long term here as long as he plays well this upcoming season. Had 36 bench press reps at the combine, which is very understandable based on the way that he plays, and it shows up on the film. But he has a variety of ways to win, both as a run defender and as a pass rusher, and there's clear limitations to his game, mainly coming back to his length, some of the range that you see as a run defender, the ability to work back over gaps, then also as a pass rusher, the way that things can kind of become really stalled early within the rep. It can struggle to really get going and find momentum early, but there's also a lot of things that you like about him, both as a run defender and as a pass rusher. And mainly, we'll start there first as a run defender. He has a very reactive first step to zone rushing schemes and to the offensive line scheme. I think the key here is, while it can be inconsistent and sometimes it can set him back, you love the consistent leverage that he plays with on entry points. You'll see this specifically as a run defender, the way that he lives underneath the pads of offensive linemen. You'll see this on the move zone blocking schemes where he'll just ride the hip on the backside of an offensive lineman, make it very difficult for those guys to get up to the second level, for those guys to go pick up linebackers at the second level, because he has adequate movement skills, but he plays so leveraged, he's tough to move, and he really doesn't give up ground in those spots. Now, the problem is he allows himself to get reach blocked a little bit here, and that's where you'll see issues of ability to sustain a gap or be able to continue to work over a wide zone scheme and then also find a way to finish. But there's a lot of stoutness on entry that, again, plays with consistent leverage as a run defender, so that some of that sustainability does pop up from what I had seen so far. But you love the build that he has. He's got that tanky build where you'll see it on some of the inside rushing schemes, maybe the duo scheme where he plays with a very wide base, low pad level on entry that's just super stout. He doesn't really get moved off the spot. He may not always play behind the line or always create the kind of lockout that you're looking for to open up a ton of range, to go from gap to gap to get stops, but he's going to settle into his spot. And then he has kind of the flip side to his game where, again, he's not the most explosive athlete, but I think where he lives is working in those short area situations, working in small spaces, and he has the background of being a state champion wrestler, and I think that's where it shows up. He's got some finesse to his game, the swim move, the ability to kind of find some slither within some small spaces. That really pops as a run defender. If you're asking him to attack and get upfield, you set him outside of a guard, he has a little bit of space to work with. You'll see that. The reactiveness where against a zone team, he can kind of just maneuver his way into the backfield. And I think when he's working upfield, he's a dangerous player because his vision becomes better. He finds the ball, from what I had seen so far, a little bit better when he's able to just attack and get upfield there. And while there can be some issues with that because he'll fall behind maybe the gap that you're hoping that he'll play, positive is with how the Lions play schematically, you'll see this with guys like Reeder. As long as they can sustain and they're not getting pushed back into the second level, if they can find a way to sustain and be really tough, especially against single blocks, and not disallow those guys to get up to the second level, you can then have your linebackers read and react and fill based on that. So if you have linebackers that are capable of reading and filling through based on how the defensive lineman fills upfield, those two things can marry together. And I think that's going to be really important here for the Lions, is that shows up as well. As a pass rusher, there is variety that he can bring to the table. I don't always feel like there's a consistent go-to move of ways to win. I think for one, he could play with a really tight entry on contact, which opens up some bull rush potential, at least early, to create some early knockback. And then he kind of transitions that because of that power he showcases in the upper body and also the core strength, but also just some of the true body control. he could transition that into finding some counter wins. There's a little bit of footwork that he can attach to it. There's a push pull that I've seen be pretty effective. And as a stunt rusher, he can be very impactful in just terms of being the crash player. He can be the guy that crashes in the offensive tackles, creates a loop opportunity. That can kind of be his role as just a true crash player on the inside to work inside outside games. So I think as a pass rusher, while he's not an elite pass rusher, he definitely brings juice. He's not a player that's just going to stand there and play the run. And we had talked about guys like that. He brings juice. And this is something that even going back to New Mexico State, I had watched interviews of him speaking of how important it is and how much he values truly just getting after the quarterback. So I'm sure the Lions are looking for a guy that can kind of bring upside for both here. And that seemingly is why they went the direction that they did, with understanding that there's definite limitations to his game. But the control for me is everything. He has that ability to get an edge. You'll see it at the top of the rush. He's got the footwork underneath him and the active hand usage, even though sometimes I think they're late. Be a little bit heavy, but they could be a little bit late. Okay, I don't always feel like he's the most sudden or explosive as a pass rusher. And again, the length is a little bit of a problem as well, which can just disallow things from really finding any kind of momentum early. But he does have that activeness to continue working, to continue to find an edge. Overall, to me, I think even though there's limited range here, this is a player that at least brings some variety to the table. I think, again, he gets reach blocked and he's on the ground a little bit too much in those spots, but he definitely plays with the wide frame, consistent leverage that can hold up against different schemes, but is truly a backup nose tackle that actually brings some juice to the table. So, again, I think there's going to be knocks here, no doubt. When you see him on the field, there's going to be plays that don't look great. There's going to be plays where, he gets kind of peeled out and you don't see him that impactful, or maybe he missteps, puts himself in the wrong spot. But one thing is for sure, that his tanky build is it's hard to down block him. It's hard to move him off his spot. It's hard to move him off his spot when he's working a field into blocks. He's kind of just like a big rock that you got to push around. And from what I had seen so far, so that's where Roy Lopez is impactful. I should have knew the Lions were going to go this route. Roy Lopez is a top tier name in free agency. So of course that's interesting. Then on top of it, he actually was an impactful player when we would have to deal with the Cardinals. They had a lot of young players on the defensive line, but we would have to deal with him. He was a player that was always like, okay, who's Roy Lopez at nose tackle? Well, now he's the Detroit Lions. Of course, do a deeper dive breakdown of Roy Lopez a little bit later in the season. Stay tuned for that. But until then, thank you for watching, and I'm out.